Population so long predicted has stolen upon us. It's getting worse week by week.
In the 1960s, a new kind of fear began to spread across America.
The U.S. could be busting out at the seams by the end of the century.
If we do not, by humane means, limit our numbers, then numbers are going to be limited by more famines and shortages and consequent social conflicts.
The idea that human population was outstripping the Earth's ability to support mankind was a powerful one. And in the hands of one man,
population growth will kill you stone cold dead.
The message reached a wider audience than ever before. But what became of the population bomb?
How many years do you have to not have the world end to decide that it didn't end because that reason was wrong?
More than 11,000 scientists signed a petition calling for population control as a means of combating climate change. Week's Speak Out segment. In an article published Tuesday in the journal Bioscience, the scientists wrote that planet Earth is, quote, facing a climate emergency. They argued that population control was a necessary response to this emergency, writing, quote, the world population must be stabilized and ideally gradually reduced.
Who makes the decision for Africa? Who has the right to determine what Africa becomes? Who claims that ownership?
One of our most pressing issues is population growth. How do you expect this to be addressed?
Well, the population growth issue at the global level is not that daunting. That is, the population percentage-wise is growing slower today than in the past, and so it will actually peak out.
That reducing human population could help the planet. That's just bad science. And who gets to decide which populations are controlled? The UN? Individual countries? Global intellectual elites? For years, there's been a push to shove birth control and abortion down the throats of women in developing countries who don't want either, by the way. We don't get to pick who is desirable or useful enough to reproduce and who should be restricted in the name of the global common good. That's called eugenics, and it can lead down a slippery slope to things like ethnic cleansing and genocide. Our Catholic faith considers care for the environment to be an issue of prudential judgment.
If we keep having this very low fertility rate, in a macro sense, the whole nation will be doomed. The economic growth will stagnate, even stop. Innovation, investment, everything will shrink.
That the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. And so their ability to feed, educate, provide jobs, stability, protect the environment in those locations mean they're faced with an almost impossible problem. Northern Nigeria, Yemen, Chad. And so what we need to do is...
It baffles me most times to hear people talk about issues that Africans are being confronted by casually, questions that deals with schemes and agendas that are affecting our continent. The professor in the stream was much on the Western ideologue side, and he was much more composed and a bit more rational in terms of what the problem is. But I think he forgot that Africa has a culture, that Africa has a tradition, that Africa maintains certain standards that the West is now reverting to. Was it not China a few years ago that had a population control mechanism of a one-child policy? And now they are reversing that policy, and now they are encouraging women to give birth to children. Was it not India that did not put preference on girl child? When a woman was pregnant in India and the entire family was telling the woman that you have to give birth to a boy, to a male. And now they are paying women to bring forth girl children, females. It tells you, when we talk of population, we are talking of the human asset, the human input as a resource for a nation to grow and become self-reliant in the long run. China is reversing to the standards that Africa has held all this while. But guess what? Those who think they know what affects Africa are now coming up and making suggestions. Oh, we want to control bats. We want to come with bat control. Have they examined the vaccines or the things that they are giving our women in Africa? Is changing their body forms? Have they examined the side effects? No, they don't. All they are doing is they come in the name of humanitarian aid to Africa, and they say, oh, these people are not civilized. Let's civilize them. Let's give them medication so that they can control birth. They can limit the number of children they are giving birth to. As if Africa has been crying to them that, oh, our children are too much, help us. Senseless comments people were leaving. Somebody even said, okay, the West has been treated unfairly because the Africa depends on the West. That is utter nonsense. Africa does not depend on the West. The West depends on Africa. And that is why they are doing everything to keep Africa where Africa is, because they talk about going down to Africa and getting the raw materials from Africa and building their nations. It is an unequal relationship. They have always leveraged Africa's incapacity not to be able to provide its own resources, because they don't have manufacturing, they don't have institutions that are well established due to foreign mechanisms that have been set to deprive Africa of their capacity. So when people make comments like, oh, the West is doing everything for Africa, Africa has this, and Africa should do, and Africa should that, this is not the Africa we the Africans are talking about. Our Africa is an Africa that has everything. His humans are well endowed to become whatever they want, because we can compete at the highest levels of learning or academics that anybody wants to. We have seen it in World War. When our men went to war, they came back, they said, oh no, these people are just humans. They are just mortals like us. They have fear, they have everything. But we are not going to that. Today, my problem is we should be learning from other countries who have gone away from tradition and culture and adapting the standards of the West that leads to alienation. The West has alienated themselves in many circumstances. It happened in Italy. Sometimes they said, oh, one child policy, because we want to create wealth. We want to create wealth for the next generation. What do you think? When your population becomes 60 or 70% above 60 years and your workforce goes down drastically, you start turning to other nations to colonize them, because your population cannot provide you the manpower that you need to run your countries. Let us be aware that whatever is being done to Africa should be done in a way that Africa is aware of the pros and cons, and we have to choose what should happen to Africa. We should not be led by people sitting in The Hague, people sitting in the United Kingdom or the United States to tell us, oh, we want to depopulate them. Depopulate us for what? Our people have a purpose in life. Africans have a purpose in life. If it were not for the estrangement of the continent by Europeans and Western countries who colonized the continent, Africa would be way ahead, because we had the most advanced institutions before colonization, and we were colonized and our institutions were destroyed because our young people were snatched from the motherland to Western industries to develop the Western world. So this is a war against African women. This is the genocide on the African continent. He might be right, but that might be too extreme. However, somebody saying we are poor because of many children, I don't believe that, because the West, at one time, families had 14, 15 children in the West. So, was that the reason for the West going to colonize Africa? Nope. They just became greedy and decided that, okay, now we have to get one child because we want to amass so much wealth and we want to consume so much. It is the West that determines Africans like sex, if you leave Africans, and these are these kind of notions that led to things like Tuskegee in the United States, because the white man was afraid of the black man, that the black man would interracially marry and they would destroy their race, and this will come with a kind of alienation of their race from the face of the earth. So what happened? Some heinous crimes were committed in Tuskegee against black men. This is not just a racial thing. That comment in this thing is not an off-put. It is in place. It might be an idea geared towards genocide. But I hope Africans are smart enough to pay attention to the things that are going on around us. If the West wants to control birth, let them do it in the West and stop exploiting Africa. Because when you stop exploiting Africa, Africa can build itself. Let's presume the West does not depend on Africa for once. Where are they getting their raw materials for their industries? Right in Africa. Why do you think they want military bases all over the world, especially in Africa? Because those can consolidate their positions so that they will have constant supply through their exploitative means to supply their industries in the West. Then yet some people think Africa is just, I think this is just another way to reduce the African people, because this is not just to reduce poverty. Because if it was for poverty reduction, the West and now Asia will not be piling debt on African countries when they know that Africans can't even pay back. This is just a way to get Africa waist deep. Sterilizing young women from birth. Do you know the repercussion of that? In 20 years, women will not be able to give birth. And do you know what happens? The West brings their technology and everything down to Africa and makes money out of them for IVF and all that. Africans should start to be aware that whatever is going on is not just in the interest of Africa. It is a concise plan, strategically positioned to bring the population into submission. I hope my African brothers and sisters will be listening and will find the courage to say no to some of these manipulative practices. We as Africans can educate our people. We can educate our young girls about the consequences of having premarital sex, about the consequences of having too many kids. But look at what is happening to the women. Women who used to look lean and nice and athletic now are putting on 40-50 pounds and they are fighting to reduce it. Why? Because these things are causing them side effects that they don't even know how to handle. But if the women are educated enough to choose between having kids or not having kids, that should be a decision made upon careful examination of the pros and cons. Not just the individual pros, but the economic pros and the grand scheme of things, especially when it comes to nation building. When your population becomes older, your ability to produce, to even sustain that population, drastically reduces. And you begin to depend on the Western world or others to fund your aged population. So let us pay attention to what we are doing, and let us look at whatever anybody is saying in the West, especially when it comes to things that will affect us in the long run. If they cannot kill us by making military junta coups and supporting governments to kill their own people, or doing things to us like they did in Tuskegee in the United States, they will find ways to get us. And they know if they strategically do that, we are not going to be suspicious enough to know what they are doing. They will come with the vaccine, they will give money to the government, corrupt governments in Africa, and these governments would pioneer the introduction of their schemes. Sometimes mandatory, as if it was compulsory for the people to do it, with little information and no options. This person was saying in the stream, he agrees that no more philanthropy should come from the Western civilizations. Remove motivations to have any agenda. Okay. Aid is not free. This is a distinction we should be making. Even though this discussion is about birth control, aid is not free. Western world makes money whenever they put money out in Africa. The other person, Born Blaze, said the West is being taken advantage of. I don't know where he lives, or I don't know what school of thought he's coming from. He said stop all aid to Africa until their population normalizes. Africa is not dependent on Western aid. Your aid has been a mechanism to exploit us more. Your aid has been a mechanism to keep Africa in debt. Your aid has been a mechanism to destabilize Africa's capacity to build its own institutions. So whoever tells you they are giving aid to Africa, let them also tell you aid from the Western world is not free. There are a lot of strings attached, and that is why I am saying we are supposed to be making decisions about our destinies, not Western people telling us what should happen to us and how we choose to live our lives. The West talks about freedom, but yet they want to control other people's lives. That is ironical. The irony in that is you talk of freedom and you want people to live according to your dictates. We must wake up for sure. Kosu 12:25, we must wake up. But whatever that means is we must wake up as Africans to begin to pay attention to what decisions are being made about our continent. Because the issues that bother Africa should be dealt with by Africans themselves. We should not be living in the shadows of the colonial masters. The colonial masters have written all the history. We must start to deconstruct those histories. We must start to rewrite our own stories as we want. The Western world had once had many children being born. Families in the West usually had 12 children. Have you ever seen anybody going to give them any birth control? Their aid is not free. When I read the agriculture report, the US agriculture report every month, my heart bleeds for the countries that think the United States or the UK is helping them or Europe is helping them. We are not being helped. We are being taken advantage of. We have been used for the production of raw materials for the West. Look at what this person is saying. Africa and India need some method of family planning. If these ignorants cannot manage themselves, then it is up to the UN to manage them and depopulate them before they destroy the entire world. You see, these are the kind of comments that tells you people in the West are clueless about what the reality of life is around the world. Climate change and human population cannot be separated from each other. And the countries or the continent that are producing more harmful things to our planet is not Africa. It's the West and the East, China, America. They are the world's pollutants. They pollute everything, and yet we say, oh, Africa should be depopulated. This is not the decision that should be made by the West for us. They made a decision for us once by forcefully abducting our men, young men and women, and brought them to their countries to build their factories and everything. And
Stanford biologist Paul Ehrlich didn't start out as a prophet of doom. His area of study focused on butterflies. But after visiting the crowded streets of Delhi, he had a realization.
If we continue to let population grow. And if we continue to exploit the underdeveloped countries, if we continue to pollute the seas with a wide variety of compounds and so on, it's very difficult for me to picture things holding together for more than another decade or so.
Take this aid generosity and this innovation and go into those places, offer the women better tools where they want to space birthing or have a smaller family size, and improve health, because it's amazingly, as children survive, parents feel like they'll have enough kids to support them in their old age, and so they choose to have less children.
Ehrlich laid out his hypothesis in a slim volume called The Population Bomb. It was a call to action for many, including a student Ehrlich advised, Stuart Brand.
There's too many people, and we'd like to see people have fewer children and better ones.
Adrienne Germain, a young women's health advocate, found herself drawn to Ehrlich as well, due to his support of birth control.
The message was that we were already in a crisis, and if we didn't have urgent and immediate action, the world would simply destroy itself.
Will be. Our cities are going to be choked with people. They're going to be choked with traffic. They're going to be choked with crime. They're going to be choked with pollution. And they will be impossible places in which to live.
Paul's picture of doom and gloom looked real.
Net world population is increasing by 23 people every 10 seconds. It's clear that world population growth remains completely out of control.
I bought it totally. Many of my friends bought it totally. I organized an event for 60 people to starve in public.
What were you trying to prove?
We had formed an organization called Zero Population Growth, and then Johnny took me on The Tonight Show.
Would you welcome Dr. Paul Ehrlich?
You have to get the death rate and birth rate in balance, and there's only two ways to do it. One is to bring the birth rate down, the other is to push the death rate up.
Ehrlich's views on how to bring the birth rate down were concrete. Compulsion if voluntary methods fail, creating a blacklist of people, companies, and organizations impeding population control in the U.S., responsibility prizes for childless marriages, a tax on children, and a luxury tax on diapers and cribs.
But concerns about population became misanthropic. And it was taken with so much seriousness that Paul Ehrlich could recommend things like putting stuff in public water that would make people not as fertile. It was a zeitgeist that was taking shape.
Attention, all citizens. Childbearing is herewith forbidden.
One of the things about zeitgeist is they have astonishing durability.
It appears that large families are on the way out, and ZPG may be possible.
The idea also took hold in the developing world, where governments like India's had already begun to embrace population control.
The core message of the book, population growth outstripping food supply, resonated quite a bit with India's elites, with the middle classes. They much preferred to believe that the poor were poor because of too many children, rather than being poor because of an unfair and unequal economic system.
If you start with that problem definition, then it's almost inevitable that there will be circumstances where governments and other actors will act in a way that is coercive.
In the mid-1970s, the Indian government began a controversial effort to encourage mass sterilization.
We do want to create an atmosphere in which people realize the importance of this program.
It led to abuses. Access to food aid and housing were sometimes used as coercion. Others weren't even given a choice.
More than 8 million sterilizations were performed, many forcibly. The people, in the words of one family planning expert, were treated like cattle.
Several days ago, crowds formed to protest being sterilized. The police opened fire and killed at least 50 of them.
Zero population growth is a tragic frame in the sense that it was assumed that there was no way out, that people would just go on reproducing until there really was a desperate circumstance in the world.
Ehrlich's message could be summed up in a dramatic prediction.
Sometime in the next 15 years, the end will come. And by the end, I mean an utter breakdown of the capacity of the planet to support humanity.
Predictions do not necessarily come true. The critics go in and look at these little stories that won't come true, and when they didn't come true, say, Ehrlich was wrong. I was recently criticized because I had said many years ago that I would bet that England wouldn't exist in the year 2000. Well, England did exist in the year 2000, but that was only 14 years ago.
But Ehrlich says it could still be just a matter of time.
One of the things that people don't understand is that timing to an ecologist is very, very different from timing to an average person.
How many years do you have to not have the world end to decide whatever reason you thought the world was going to end, that actually maybe it didn't end because that reason was wrong?
Ehrlich predicted that by the 1970s, India would be starving. Quite to the contrary. The Green Revolution came to India with a big bang and a boom in such a rapid way that India has never looked back.
Although an estimated 3 million children around the world still die of malnutrition every year, the Green Revolution's farming technology helped lessen rates of hunger in the developing world over the decades, even as the world's population skyrocketed.
I know Paul Ehrlich reasonably well, and I respect him as a biologist. I don't and never have, and he knows it, agreed with his views on population. There's a tendency to apply to human beings the same sort of models that may apply for the insect world. The difference, of course, is that human beings are conscious beings, and we do all kinds of things to change our destiny.
Paul Ehrlich saw a density of people that frightened him, but with time we've been able to look past the car window into what's actually going on with the demographics of the people who live there, and they're not having so many kids, and that's changed the whole story.
That story is playing out today in parts of India. In growing cities like Chennai in the south, large families, once needed for farming, are no longer always seen as the key to success.
Previously, my father used to have 4 children, and my grandfather used to have 7 children. But the things have changed. Even myself, I have only 2 children. Even my sister is having only 1 kid, because now education becomes the first priority here.
Kamal Sharma takes time off from work to walk his 3 children home from school in the northern city of Patna, where he lives with his wife, Seema Devi.
मेरे लिए 3 बच्चे बहुत काफी है. मेरे हस्बैंड का सैलरी भी कम है.
Devi made her own choice to limit her family size, unlike in the 1970s, when some people were forcibly sterilized. Although the national policy has changed, pressure to meet unofficial sterilization targets remains in many areas of the country, and sometimes turns sterilization surgery into a dangerous assembly line.
We are told that 83 women were operated upon in a span of just 6 hours by a single doctor.
The population bomb was defused by urbanization, by people getting out of poverty all over the world, by having enough to eat so you didn't have multiple children in the hopes that some of them would survive. And it's somewhat ironic that what
our message remains the same today. There are nearly 4 billion more people in the world, but if the world were to succeed in its decades-old task to curb population growth, what then?
What if large population is not bad but is good?
What many more countries are already trying to come to terms with is aging of the population.
Japan needs more women to have children. The fertility rate's low. The population is getting older and shrinking.
America's in the midst of a baby bust.
China is hoping for a new baby boom.
While certain population hotspots remain a concern, largely in areas with the scarcest resources, much of the world is now grappling with the flip side of the population bomb.
The point at which population peaks, around 9 billion in the 2040s or 50s, the story will not be, oh my God, we got 9 billion people, how horrible. It'll be, oh my God, we're running out of people.
We should make decisions and support policy based on 4 general principles of Catholic social teaching: dignity of the human person, common good, subsidiarity, and solidarity. There can be different proposals to address the problems related to the environment, but those never should come at the expense of human life and human dignity. Population control comes at the expense of human dignity.